Let's go over Chapter 2, Organization Renewal, the Challenge of Change. Organizations face pressures to change and to keep changing, and those could be pressures from the market. Maybe consumers want something different. There could be new products on the market, so when you're BlackBerry, you need to be very concerned when you see that iPhone come up. And of course, competition between organizations and between companies is a part of that. These pressures for change result in actions like downsizing, re-engineering, flattening structures. And what those three things mean, or they all refer to, is making a company either smaller or flatter. And by flatter, we're talking about making more autonomous or independent teams versus a really bureaucratic top-down pyramid structure, which is less able to adapt and change and do things differently. So those three things represent changes that organizations make to become more adaptive. Organizations also sometimes have to adapt if they're going to have global operations, and then they have to learn very new ways of doing things. Renewal refers to the ongoing process of change. So organizational renewal and organizational development are different terms. So change is constant. The world out there is always changing. And what we don't want to do is stay the same and then have the world change to the point that we're no longer adapted at all and that what we're doing is totally not working, and then be shocked and either fail or have to have a sudden transformation. So we need to build innovation and adaptation into the organization. If we don't do that, we can have something called future shock. That refers to just having too much change in too short of time. I think we've all felt some future shock with the changes we've had to go through related to the global pandemic. You know, just seeing people out there wearing masks. However, we were, as a university, able to become a remote university, become a remote operation in about something like a week. I think we did a pretty good job of that. I'm doing this video lecture here at home, and we were able to adapt in that way instead of just kind of failing and not being able to offer any courses, because we had the ability to, even though it was very difficult and a lot of stress for a lot of people, we had that ability to change. So managers need to make changes, or managers need to have structures or processes in place that allow them to continually adapt to the environment. And that can refer to things like leadership styles, business processes, or even just having a culture that recognizes that sometimes we have to do things differently. Renewal uses a systems approach to observe, analyze, and solve problems. So we can't solve a problem in an organization if we have a really micro level view. We have to understand how the organization is working as a system, because systems are made of component parts that are interdependent and affect each other. So we always have to have that kind of bird's eye view. There are 4 ways that organizations adapt to change, and they're summarized in this 2x2 matrix. So on the x-axis, we have adaptive orientation. So are we ready to change? Are we open to change? Are we good at change on the high end? And then on the low end, we have organizations that are resistant to change and that like to keep doing things the same way. Then we can ask about the environment, because some environments are very stable and others are rapidly changing. So a university exists in a pretty stable situation every year. fresh crop of 18-year-olds come out of high school, and they're looking to take courses in English and history, whatever. It's kind of the same scene from year to year. But in other markets, like let's say the mobile phone market, there's lots of innovation and lots of new products are coming out, and companies really have to stay on their toes. So when we combine these two axes, we get 4 different kinds of management. So first we have sluggish thermostat management. And that's a situation where we have resistance to change. We're stuck in our ways and we like to do things the same way across many years, but we're in a stable environment, so we don't really need to change. It's kind of okay to be like that. So those are low risk, stable environments where the organization's goals are stable, things look the same from year to year, and we don't really need to be innovative because in fact that might even be a risk to do so. And in these organizations, and I think a university is possibly one of these types of organizations, we have highly centralized structure and lots of bureaucracy. Now, in an environment that is stable, but where we are willing to change, we get something called satisficing management. And it's management that is satisfactory, it's good enough, and because of the low level of pressure for change from the environment, we never get into being a high-performing organization or making products that are really state-of-the-art. So what we see is an average level of industry performance. So because of the stable environment, we're going to see the development of bureaucracy, and decision making will be centralized at the top, and you're going to have things like formal committees and processes. And those types of structures aren't always the best for being very creative or adaptable. So that willingness to change and problem solve, but bringing that type of organizational structure creates a situation where we kind of have an average level of performance. Now let's look at what we'd get if we had a turbulent, very changing environment and a low adaptive orientation. That's called reactive management, and it's when we have sudden shocks that we're not prepared for. And what typically happens here is that we have a sluggish thermostat management situation where we're doing the same thing the same way for a long time, and that's okay. And we're not really paying attention to the environment, and then the environment changes, and then it's like, oh dear, what are we going to do? And you see sudden changes there. You see a company maybe trying to replace its CEO. That's kind of typical. So I would say there was a reactive management style in BlackBerry when they realized that they were in trouble, and they got rid of their CEO, and then I think they got rid of another CEO, and then they finally turned into I think they're like a security software company now. So that's the way they managed once they realized that they had to change, and they had to change very quickly. So this is not an ideal situation at all. Now, when we have that kind of environment and a willingness to be adaptive, we get renewing transformational management. And those types of companies or organizations understand that they're in a turbulent, changing environment, and so they're prepared for change. They anticipate the future. They're always asking, what's coming up next from our competitors? What products do people want to see? They're fast at developing new ideas. They're participative, so they'll have a lot of employee engagement. They'll be very responsive to employee needs and willing to let people do things in different ways that work. So consider a company like Google that lets people have 20% of their time to just work on a passion project, or that allows people to, work late into the night and dress in their sweats if that's how they get their software engineering done best. So these are really flexible, creative organizations. In organizational development, as I've mentioned, we need to use a systems approach. So a system is a set of interrelated parts that are all brought together with a common purpose or goal. At St. Mary's University, we have a goal of providing largely undergraduate education. So 90% of our students are undergrads, and they're going to be getting their BA or their BSc. And so the goal is to deliver that. And we also have some other goals, like faculty produce research that helps move science forward, and we participate with community organizations to do work with businesses and entrepreneurs. But let's just sort of focus on the common goal of providing educations. So there are a lot of different departments and teams that do different things, but that are all working towards upholding the university as a whole so that it can deliver degrees. So we have a faculty of science, and that's where the science departments like chemistry and psychology and math are. We have departments at the individual level, like the philosophy department. So philosophy professors work together to research philosophy, write papers, and teach courses. We have departments like HR, and they will have people who do payroll for professors. They have occupational health and safety. They have a conflict resolution office. What other departments do we have? We have facilities, so those are the people that keep the buildings clean, that change the light bulbs. We have food services, so Sodexo it's actually Aramark, provides your on-campus dining. We have housing and residence. So all those different departments have specialized functions, like taking care of payroll, but it's all towards supporting the organization as a whole. So a systems approach breaks a company or an organization down into key processes and people, the people who deliver the lectures, the people who change the light bulbs, the conflict resolution process, the hiring process. And there are teams of people in different departments that run those processes. So all the people in HR, whether that's conflict or payroll or inclusion and diversity, work together on the first floor of McNally South under the direction of Kim Squires as a team to do HR for the university. But things that other departments do, things that happen in the university as a whole, affect HR, and things that affect HR affect all the people that work at the university. The basic qualities of systems are that they are designed to accomplish objectives. So say the objective of graduating students. The elements have an established arrangement. So at the university we have an organizational structure that these are the HR officers, and this is the director of the HR, who then reports to the associate vice president of something, I don't know what, probably the VPAR, who would then report to the president, and you have the board of governors. So there's a structure and an arrangement, a hierarchy, and then these different elements or departments are interdependent and related to each other. The organization as a whole is more important than all the elements. So the well-being of St. Mary's University as a whole is a higher priority than how well the HR department is doing. What does it mean when they say that the ingredients of the process are more vital than the elements? That's from page 38. And what that means is that instead of focusing on the organization as a set of roles and relationships, a set of elements in an organizational structure, we're going to focus on the flows of information, flows of personnel, flows of products through the organization. And so it's about the flow of inputs and outputs. And we'll describe the system from that kind of view. So inputs are resources that are applied to the processing function. That means, I guess, a professor and a textbook are the inputs that go into teaching a course. Processes are the activities and functions that are performed to produce the services. So part of the activities and functions of you getting your degree at the end of the day is all the work you're doing in this course. And it's about the process of me teaching this material to you now. And then output is the product or service produced by the organization, and that's you with your bachelor's degree. So we're seeing the organization as an entity that takes these inputs and converts them into the service that we're providing. The organization receives inputs from the environment, so it gets its professors, and you have your incoming students, and you have your textbook suppliers providing your textbooks. Then you act on the inputs by transforming them, so you get the professors to use the textbooks to teach the students, and then you return the transformed element, the trained and taught and educated student, into the environment as product. So that's you going out into the world to enter the workforce and contribute to society. Systems are always interacting with the environment, and the environment provides feedback for organizational change or adaptation. So let's say that the environment in Nova Scotia changes so that we have more bank branches opening up. And so then we have more students who want to study business. We would therefore have to go and have more business programs, more courses on banking. We'd have to hire professors that teach those courses. So we'd have to make changes to our human resources or perhaps to program structure. And then we would produce more business graduates to go out into the environment and work for those banks. The socio-technical systems approach is important. This is what you'll be applying in your case analyses. And it shows a system as consisting of 5 subsystems: goals and values, technical, structural, psychosocial, that's culture, and managerial. We'll talk about all of those in turn. The goals and values subsystem is about the basic mission and vision of the organization. What's that about? So it could be graduating students, curing patients, making widgets, growing money, whatever that is. Why are we here? The psychosocial subsystem, which refers to culture, is about the network of social relationships and the behavioral patterns of members. So how we do things is about norms and roles and how we communicate. So many of you will communicate with me by saying, I don't know, dear Professor Billsbury or something like that, rather than using my first name. I actually do prefer if you use my first name, but never mind. There's the point there is that we have a norm where students refer to their professors in a certain way. The structural subsystem is basically about organizational design and the org chart. So it's also about, it's more than just roles and job descriptions, though. It's also about policies and procedures. And it would tell us how work is divided. So payroll gets done by Melissa in HR, and what the patterns of authority are. So I answer to the chair of the Department of Psychology, who answers to the Dean of Science, who answers to, I think, one of the vice presidents, who would answer to the president. So that's what that's about. The technical subsystem is about the primary activities, functions, operations, and the techniques and equipment that we use to do that in order to produce the output of the system. And so that might be me teaching a lecture. That's a process, and it involves equipment like the laptop that I'm using now, and the webcam, and the video editing software, and then Brightspace. The managerial system is at the center of the 4 subsystems because it's the one that integrates all the other subsystems into performing the basic mission of the organization. It's about coordinating them and leading them towards doing that. High performance systems don't happen by chance. They occur by design. So Google is an example of a very high performing system, and they have a culture that supports that. For instance, one of their 10 sayings is that great just isn't good enough. So they're always trying to do the best thing. There are 5 key variables that managers have to consider if they want to maximize performance. The first one is the business situation. That refers to forces in the environment. So let's say that we want St. Mary's to be a really high-performing university and a big university. We get almost all our revenue from student fees, which goes back to enrollment. So if we want to be a great university, we need to have the resources or the money to support great programs, which means we need lots of students. Now, the birth rate's declining in Nova Scotia and Canada, so our business situation is that we need to recruit students from international countries, say from China. Our business strategy refers to goals and values, what we're trying to do and how we're going to do it. So one of the major values here at St. Mary's is community. And we would like you as a student to really connect to the university as a community. And then after you graduate, you can stay connected as an alum. Maybe if you have your own business, you'll have students doing their co-ops or internships with you. And when you become rich and famous, you'll become a big donor. Then managers also have to think about the design element, so things like technology and structure. So for us to become a remote university or a bigger university that also offers online learning, we need to support professors by training them in how to make online lecture videos. I had to figure out how to do this on my own, and it was really hard. Then there's the culture. So sometimes universities can have these stodgy traditionalist attitudes where we just want to give podium lectures in brick and mortar classrooms, and we're not kind of thinking about how to do things in new ways that are more flexible. One of the great things about online learning is that since you can watch this lecture anytime you want and take your test almost anytime you want, you can hold down a part-time job and also go to school. So that should increase enrollment by making university more accessible to people who are working. Athabasca University is much younger than we are, and it's already 6 times bigger, and that's because they were very much on the front lines of modernizing education. So they're a mostly online university. And then you have to also think about the business results, the outputs produced. So are we producing students who have not just content area knowledge, but also the social skills to work well with each other in order to do well in the workplace? And key feedback that we get from employers is that they'd like to see more social development in students. So if we want to be a bigger, better university, we need to focus on things like team activities and group work and what we can learn from group process. Now you know why I've assigned you to groups and teams. The contingency approach to management is, at the very general level, a theory that says that there's no one best way to manage. It depends on context and circumstances. It thinks about the organization in its environment, which is our systems approach. So any given problem, there is no one right way to solve it. It depends on the organization, depends on the organization's environment. So let's say that a problem is low or declining enrollment. How we solve that is going to be different for St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where we can recruit abroad because recruit international students because Canada is an attractive destination. That's a different situation than, let's say, if Athabasca University wants to increase enrollment because they focus on a completely different demographic. And maybe for them, it's finding about what kind of jobs people are looking for in the market, and then designing online courses that appeal to what the people who are enrolling in their university, which might be more mature students, more part-time students, and what they need. So the way we answer the question depends on the organization, what's going on in its different subsystems, and its broader environment. Even within the same organization, you can't necessarily solve the same problem in the same way in different sections of the organization, in different departments and different teams, because they have different cultures. So let's take the example of the philosophy department, which is small and tight-knit and everyone gets along really well. So if there's problem X, they can probably come together in a faculty meeting and all talk about it and listen to each other, and they could come up with a collaborative, consensus-based solution. Now take a bigger department like psychology. Let's say you have different in-groups or factions of professors, and let's say they can't agree on how to do something. In that case, you might need higher level of leadership to make a decision and impose it. So you have the same problem that require different solutions in different sections of the organization just because they have a different context. So the contingency approach is about recognizing how important context is. Organization transformation and organizational development are different concepts. They're both approaches to managing change, but they do it in different ways. Organizational transformation is a sudden change in the organization's form or appearance. It's a revolution. It's directed from the top to transform an organization quickly. So it's an unplanned change in response to a pressure, and it happens in a short time frame. And I would say that that St. Mary's becoming a remote or virtual university in response to the coronavirus pandemic is a good example of organization transformation. So when they were doing the university's business plan for 2020, they didn't see this coming, right? This was not something anyone planned for, and it happened in about the space of a week. We're getting emails every day from the vice presidents. We had 2 days to vacate our offices and labs, and students had to leave residence quite quickly. I have to learn how to deliver an online course for the first time without any support. I'm just figuring it out, and we're all kind of scrambling. That corresponds to the reactive management style. So we were in a stable state because the environment was stable. We've been doing the things the same way for a very long time. Brick and mortar university, podium lectures in a classroom, and now we have to figure out how to do things in a completely different way. We weren't ready for that in a way a more adaptive organization might have been. Organizational development is a longer, more gradual and intentional process. It's about always thinking about what could be going on, what might happen, and how we'd be ready to adapt to that. And it is planned change that affects the organization on a large scale. So how can we offer remote learning? How can we appeal to different demographics of students, like our Indigenous students who may have to do things differently. And that's not just about what one team or one class or one professor is doing. It's about what we're all doing as an organization. And so we would modify the organization as a whole in some ways, or major parts of it, like what the Faculty of Science is doing. Maybe offering more co-op education because people want hands-on learning. But we'd have to be in a position where we're ready to have those conversations with students and to think about how we could be doing things differently. That's about culture in many ways. OD focuses on the effectiveness of individuals, teams, and the organization. So at the individual level, we would want to improve individual employees' skills, their technical skills or their social skills. So if we're developing professors, we want to help them become better teachers, help them manage their time better so that they can answer all their emails and give quality feedback to students on time. For team effectiveness, we would focus on the task of the team, so what the team does, and then also team processes, how the team works. So we have a team that's producing widgets. We would look at the widget producing task and say, how well are we doing that? Can we speed up this process? Would an assembly line work better? And then for process, we'd look at something like how the team works together. So is everyone getting along? What kind of leadership style are we using, and does it work well? How are we communicating with each other? Conflict is a big point there. Organization effectiveness is focused on the total system. So how is St. Mary's University as a whole working? And do we need to make any changes in structure, in management, or technology? I think that we may need to get more support for online learning. So we may need people who can train professors in how to deliver online courses. And that would apply to teaching across the entire organization.